So, I was thinking the other day about TV shows, movies, music, and general pieces of art and entertainment that I personally enjoy, even though a lot of other people don't seem to. And I wouldn't go as far as to say that these are guilty pleasures. I don't feel guilt or shame for how much I like these things. The feeling is much closer to confusion. And regarding the topic of this video, I have never really understood why people seem to dislike The Legend of Korra and Korra the character so much. Whenever I talk to friends or just random people who might happen to be fans of Avatar about these two shows, it always seems like they feel the need to bring up The Last Airbender as a justification or explanation for why Legend of Korra was so bad or disappointing. And yeah, if you expected Legend of Korra to be better than what was arguably the greatest animated series ever created, you're right that it fell short, but you're also kind of insane for ever expecting lightning to strike twice like that. And all of this isn't to suggest that The Legend of Korra should be above criticism, because the show has clear flaws and shortcomings. But I guess I just wish that those flaws and shortcomings would be viewed through a lens solely focused on The Legend of Korra, rather than one focused on constantly comparing it to its predecessor. I really like The Legend of Korra. I remember being a young high school kid when the first couple of episodes dropped on Nickelodeon's website, and I remember staying up late to watch and then rewatch them over and over again on my computer. As someone who back then thought that the story in the world of Avatar would end with Aang's story in Last Airbender, finding out that there was going to be a sequel series set generations in the future that would vastly expand the Avatar universe was better than Christmas, honestly. I'm not exactly sure what the consensus on Book 1 of Legend of Korra is throughout the fandom, but I personally think that Book 1 is dope as hell, and it's probably on par, if not slightly better than Book 1 from Last Airbender. I thought the early 1900s-esque time period was a really interesting idea and was executed really well. I thought the pro-bending bits were pretty dope and creative too. The smaller episode count going from 20 in The Last Airbender to 13 in The Legend of Korra made for a really well-paced and succinct narrative. I thought Amon was a great and interesting villain with a power that perfectly expounded upon one of the coolest powers from The Last Airbender series. I thought Korra as a hard-headed and stubborn main character was a really good pivot in terms of protagonist archetypes from Aang's more gentle, nice guy personality. And even though the supporting cast of heroes weren't as well written and memorable as the OG Team Avatar, I still saw a lot of potential for them to grow into beloved and well-written characters just like their predecessors. Yeah, that didn't really happen. I have two major issues with the Legend of Korra series, and I believe that these are two issues that both I and the haters of the show share. I'll share my second major issue later in the video, but my first major issue is Book 2. That's it. That's the issue. Book 2 is kinda ass.
That shit was f***ing ass!
I really liked how Book 1 of Legend of Korra made a waterbender the main villain of the show, but then they followed that up by having another waterbender be the main villain in Book 2. And even though learning more about Korra's family and her father's rivalry with her uncle was kind of interesting, I guess, I just didn't think anything in the arc was nearly as interesting or entertaining as the main plot elements and characters of Season 1. Varric is annoying as hell, Bolin's whole movie star subplot and marriage to Unalaq's daughter was completely pointless and a waste of screen time, Mako was just simping the whole arc, Asami was doing who gives a f***, and even though I like Korra as a character, even I have to admit that the way she was written, especially in the first half of the season, made her look so bratty and annoying that it became increasingly hard to defend her as a great character with each passing episode. The only saving grace of this season that didn't make it a complete snooze fest was the Avatar 1 flashback episodes that explained the origin of the Avatar, and the final battle between Korra and the Dark Avatar was also pretty fire. It wasn't the greatest climax to a season of Avatar ever, but it was definitely a far cry from the horrible build-up that was 80% of Book 2. I feel like a lot of Avatar fans stopped watching the show after Book 2 as well. I remember back when the show was airing on television, a lot of the promo and marketing for the show seemed to slow down, if not stop completely after Book 2 aired. Book 2 was so bad that it damn near killed the whole series. Luckily though, it didn't. Because in June of 2014, we got one of the most fascinating seasons of television that I have ever seen in Book 3 of The Legend of Korra. And I don't just mean that Book 3 was fascinating to watch. I mean that it's fascinating how much I actually liked Book 3 despite all of its clear flaws. Because as mind-bendingly good as some of the moments in the season are, there are definitely still some big misses in this season. Book 3 of The Legend of Korra is called Change, which is interesting for a couple of reasons. One is that it's the first title of an Avatar book that isn't an element or something directly related to the Avatar's power. Book 2 of The Legend of Korra was called Spirits, and even though spirit isn't an element, the Avatar does technically get their power from the spirit world. But titling an entire season of television as Change implies that there's going to be some, well, change. And the season starts by showing the world has changed in a major way. See, after Korra fights Unalaq, or the Dark Avatar, during harmonic convergence in the Book 2 finale, the human world and the spirit world become connected, which leads to an influx of spirit creatures into the human world. All over the world, a very select number of seemingly random people who previously weren't able to bend suddenly gained the ability to airbend. Almost like the spirit world decided to balance out the percentage of benders as a thanks for finally merging the realms. This whole balancing the world with more airbenders thing seems to be a universal good at first. But then we get introduced to one of my favorite f***ing characters and arguably the best aspect of Book 3, Zahir of the Red Lotus. In my last Avatar video, I said that Azula is arguably the greatest villain of all time. Well, if that's the case, then Zahir is basically the LeBron James to Azula's Michael Jordan. Zahir is a man who was not born a bender, but he had dedicated his life to studying the ways of the airbenders and the nomadic monks of the air temples. He was imprisoned 13 years before the events of Legend of Korra for plotting with Hater of the Year Unalaq to kidnap Korra in a misguided attempt to liberate the world from all structure and conventional constructs. See, Zahir isn't one of those self-interested villains who turned evil because of some grudge with the hero or because he was treated poorly as a kid or something like that. No. Zahir is a pure-blooded, 100% down for the cause, real-deal anarchist who, in his own words, believes
true freedom can only be achieved when oppressive governments are torn down.
But that won't bring balance. It will throw the world into chaos.
Exactly. The natural order is disorder.
He and his gang are called the Red Lotus Clan, which is a rebel offshoot of the White Lotus Clan that Iroh and the other geriatric masters from the last Airbender series were all a part of. And once Zahir breaks out of prison with his newfound airbending abilities, he goes on a quest to free his Red Lotus members from captivity so that they can kidnap and kill Korra while in the Avatar state to end the cycle of the Avatar once and for all. Why would they want to do that, you ask? Well, everything for Zahir always comes back to
the natural order is disorder.
Zahir is one of my favorite villain archetypes because not only is he incredibly smart, competent, and powerful enough to match the heroes in strength and strategy, he's also too insane to reason with, which means you know that the hero isn't going to be able to talk him out of his evil ways. They're going to have to fight and do things they ordinarily wouldn't in order to win. And I always love to see a righteous hero have their worldview challenged by a force that they seemingly cannot defeat with classic Naruto talk no jutsu. Much like how Book 2 of The Last Airbender introduced me to ideas of Buddhist religion and Eastern philosophy, watching Zahir explain the founding principles of anarchy was also a new and eye-opening experience for me. And after saying that, I feel like I have to explicitly state that I am not an anarchist and I do not agree with the anarchist philosophy in any way. But it is a very interesting belief system to give a villain, and before watching The Legend of Korra, I had never really considered what an anarchist's point of view of how to better change the world would be. This is just another example of the Avatar series introducing me and showing me things that I otherwise wouldn't know about or really think about at all. And that's what great art does. In regards to the early episodes of Book 3, I don't actually think they're all that interesting, all things considered. They're definitely not bad like Book 2's introduction was, but to me, everything in the first few handful of episodes in Book 3 just serves as build-up for the incredible climax at the end. Some story moments / plot elements that I think are important to note are Korra choosing to trust the new character Kai and take him with them to learn airbending despite all of the clear signs of him being a good-for-nothing street punk, which he basically is. This is a really dope moment to me because it gives more evidence of Korra having a very caring heart despite her rough exterior. I also really like the juxtaposition between the goofy adventures of Korra and her friends with the scenes of Zahir breaking out his fellow unhinged and criminally insane Red Lotus clan members from their respective prisons. It helps build a great amount of tension and intrigue for the rest of the season. But, speaking of Korra's goofy friends, I think this is as good of a time as any to bring up my second major issue with this series. Mako, Bolin, Asami, Tenzin, and pretty much all of the Legend of Korra original side characters, yeah, they're all kind of ass.
That was f***ing ass.
And I say kind of ass because they all have their redeeming qualities and they have moments in the series where they shine. The problem is that most of those great moments are mainly in book 1. And pretty much any even slightly cool or interesting moments after that from these characters just feels kind of underwhelming for some reason. Despite what a lot of people seem to think about Korra as a protagonist, I always really f***ed with her. Like I said before, she's definitely stubborn as hell and definitely immature in certain areas, but I think watching her grow from that stubborn and immature person into a more patient and understanding avatar is one of the coolest aspects of the show. We watched Aang go from a goofy kid who ran from his responsibilities to a goofy kid who accepted his responsibilities. It was definitely a good arc, but watching Korra go from such a bold and brazen personality to someone who constantly has to deal with failure and a loss of confidence was an equally as entertaining and captivating character arc to me. My issues are not with her character, it's more with everyone else's. I swear, half the time I forget Asami is even a character in this show. Like, she'll say a line and I'll be like, who the fuck is that? Before I quickly remember, oh, that's supposed to be an important character, even though they have not said or done anything of importance in like 3 episodes and counting. Asami was a very interesting character in book 1. I feel like I need to say that. Then she basically takes 2 books off and comes back near the end of book 4 to be Korra's surprise love interest. And if we're just counting her beginning and end, then yeah, what a great character arc, but unfortunately there was a very large middle section in between and man, was that forgettable as f***. And then you have a character like Bolin, who had all the potential to be great comic relief after book 1, but then he just started to become 10 times more annoying than he was funny. I feel like Bolin was sort of built up to be this generation's Sokka, for lack of a better term. But for some bizarre reason, the writers decided to give him all of Sokka's obnoxious traits with none of Sokka's good traits like his strategic intelligence. He's also easily the weakest bender in the group, and many times he ends up being a damsel in distress and a liability in battle. I don't hate Bolin, but watching him on screen always makes me mad because all of the ingredients for a great character were there, but the writers fumbled the shit out of it over the course of the series. And then there's Mako, who was a sort of a you love to hate him type of douchebag in book 1, and I feel like he had a very Sasuke-esque too cool for school kind of personality with the fighting skills to back it all up. Like, he was easily hateable, but that's what made him stand out and made him an interesting character. Then he became slightly less hateable in book 2, I guess, but much less important to the plot at the same time. And then he just became a stern and boring cop in books 3 and 4, and they just made him more and more of a bore as the show went on, to the point that by the end I didn't love or hate him, I just simply did not care about him. And then there's Tenzin, who I definitely would not call a bad character, but he's a character who's basically just repeated the same arc of incompetence and failure over and over and over again. He tries to protect Korra and fails.
You fail.
He tries to protect his family and fails.
You fail.
He tries to win a fight against a villain and he fails.
You fail.
It's kind of funny to see Aang's son be so unlike him at first, but after a while, Tenzin's inability to ever really do anything kind of makes his character a walking joke, which again is kind of ironic considering how serious his personality is. He's an absolutely necessary character, but similar to Bolin, I wish they would have made him more of an actual force to be reckoned with in combat. That would have at least been a start. And then you have the much less important side characters like Kai, Bumi, Kaya, Tenzin's kids, Korra's parents. They all range from completely forgettable to actually kind of entertaining, but none of them are really given the screen time or the attention from the writers to make a real impact on me. And at the end of the day, I really think it's the lack of interesting characters that hold The Legend of Korra back the most. It was okay in book 1 when the character roster was smaller and there was still some leeway in terms of letting them develop and grow on me, but by book 2 and 3, I was just kind of over it, and I found myself getting a little bored whenever the side characters were on screen too long without a cutaway to Zahir or Korra. One thing The Legend of Korra and many shows like it suffer from is that there's just too many characters. It's hard enough to make the audience care about your main core of characters, but when those characters have to split screen time with 30 other characters just to allow the narrative to move forward, then you really run into issues. Couple that with the fact that The Legend of Korra only had 13 episodes a season compared to The Last Airbender's 20, and you can probably see why this became such an issue. There is one exception though. There is one side character that I believe the show got right and helped make Book 1 and Book 3 much more enjoyable to watch. And that side character is Lin motherfucking Beifong, basically the Severus Snape of the Avatar series. Lin has basically everything you would want in a character in a sequel show. A direct connection to a beloved character from the original series? Check. A mysterious and sympathetic past that gradually gets revealed to the viewer over the course of the show? Check. A very strong ability that's fun to watch and makes her a threat to anyone she fights? Check. A personality that causes her to constantly clash with the protagonist even though they both want to do what's right? Check. And being a key factor in some of the most memorable moments in the show? Check. Lin Beifong is the type of side character that feels like they could have had an entire show made strictly about them. And to me, that's how well damn near every side character in a show should be written. And it's not even like Lin gets a lot of shine in Book 3. She has just a couple of episodes about her and her sister's tumultuous past, and then it's back to focusing on Korra and Zahir. But in those few episodes, we get an interesting story about the complexities of family dynamics, the struggles of what comes with success, and how hard yet important it is to learn how to put ego and the past aside in order to be there for the people who love us. Also, I think it's kind of funny that Toph and Aang kind of end up being deadbeats as parents in this series. Like, obviously there are worse parents, but it just goes to show that great people don't always make the best parental figures. In my previous video about how great the Ba Sing Se arc of The Last Airbender was, I mentioned that Book 2 did an incredible job of the slow build that ultimately paid off with an amazing and unforgettable climax. My feelings on why I like Book 3 of Legend of Korra so much are very similar. Look, it even has Ba Sing Se in it too. While I do think the whole arc of Korra meeting the rest of the Beifong family in the City of Metal was pretty cool, it really just serves as an appetizer for the main course. And that main course is full of batshit crazy hype moments. We get Zahir giving Korra the Anarchy for Dummies lecture in episode 9. We get a bunch of dope-ass fights with all different kinds of unique benders like lava benders versus metal benders, Combustion Woman versus a team of airbenders, an armless waterbender fighting Mako who, for some reason, waited until the very end of the season to shoot lightning for the first time. We get so many great moments of Zahir going absolutely stupid on these motherfuckers. Like him slowly pulling the air out of the Earth Queen's lungs as he lectures her about the evils of dictators and why they need to be eliminated.
Think freedom is something that you can give or take on a whim. But to your people, freedom is just as essential as air. And without it, there is no life. There is only darkness.
I'm him. I've been him. I will continue to be him.
We also get what is probably my favorite Tenzin moment of all time, where he goes full Rock Lee against the Red Lotus to protect his family, but, of course, because he's Tenzin, fails.
You fail.
But hey, he showed heart and he put on one of, if not the very best fight in the whole series. So I'm still rocking with him just for that. And in Enter the Void, which is one of the best episodes in the entire Avatar series, we get the type of moment for Zahir that's usually only reserved for the heroes of a story. In Book 2, Guru Patek tried to explain to Aang the importance of detachment. To have powerful bonds of love with good people is imperative to a good life, but also the ability to sever yourself from those bonds and connections is also imperative as well. Aang, a 12-year-old lovesick boy at the time, struggled with this concept, and even Zahir, an extremely disciplined and insane grown man, was still tethered to this world by his love for Combustion Woman. I know she has a real name, but Combustion Woman just sounds cooler to say. But when she's taken out by the Beifong sisters in one of the most brutal ways ever, Zahir loses his last connection to this world, and he's finally able to become wind. And that man starts zipping around like a bumblebee on Adderall for the rest of the season. Also, I just gotta mention, the specific track that plays during the final battle with Korra and Zahir sounds like some epic-ass Batman shit. It goes absolutely crazy. There's just so many incredible moments in these last 5 to 6 episodes of Book 3. It feels like a never-ending roller coaster of emotions, and it finally does come to an end with one of the most heartbreaking moments of the whole series. Korra ends up getting Joe Swanson from her epic fight with Zahir. And during what should be a happy and beautiful moment of Jinora finally being christened as an airbending master in a grand ceremony, Korra is forced to just sit and watch from her wheelchair, only being able to silently shed a tear. Korra sacrificed her body and almost lost her life. She gave everything she had to save the world from Zahir's tyranny. And now it's as if the world will just move on without her, and she's left to pick up the pieces of her life and try to move forward. It's an incredibly powerful moment that conveys so much emotion and subtext in just one simple shot. From an emotional, narrative, and character standpoint, this is such a perfect send-off to Season 3 and a perfect start to Season 4. And people try to say this show is trash. And I remember watching this introductory episode to Season 4 and thinking, oh man, this final season is about to be f***ing amazing. And then it quickly devolved into some bullshit about a bunch of characters I cared nothing about. Yeah, Book 4 is kind of really disappointing after the great send-off from Book 3. It's not as bad as Book 2, but it focuses way too much on the new villain Kuvira and the whole power struggle for the Earth Kingdom, which is just way less interesting than Korra dealing with her trauma. But that's more or less the Legend of Korra, and specifically how Book 3 perfectly encapsulated all of the best and some of the worst aspects of the show. Was The Legend of Korra a perfect show? Not even close, but I stand by that it's a damn good show either way, with a lot of great moments and a lot of elements that are on par with, if not slightly better than The Last Airbender. When I finished The Legend of Korra for the first time, I thought it was weird that despite all of my issues with the show, I was still sad that it was over. Honestly, I think I might have been more sad when The Legend of Korra ended than I was when The Last Airbender ended. Maybe it's because I wanted more from the show. Maybe it was because I was slightly older and had a greater sense of nostalgia. I don't know. But somehow, a show with so many clear flaws and subpar final season left an indelible mark on me, and to this day, I still think back to certain moments and episodes with a warm fondness. I guess it's a reminder that things don't always have to be perfect to be memorable, and that art, as with people, doesn't have to be defined by flaws and shortcomings. The Legend of Korra did a lot of things wrong, but it also did just enough right to make me a fan. I expected more from it. We all could have gotten more from it. But in the end, I think what we ended up getting was more than enough.